Look, I say this every year. I'm allowed one negative list and the rest of the year-end list content is going to be super duper positive. Okay, is that allowed? Just one? Let me have just one. And the one video I always take each year is the most disappointing albums of the year, because we all have them. Okay, we all expect big things from certain artists and certain albums, and there may be a lot of hype generated by that one album, by that one artist, and then the album comes out and you're let down. And you might be the only one let down and everyone else is loving it, and you're just on your own feeling like you just don't get it and you don't know what's going on and you don't know what's wrong with yourself, and it's very sad. Well, these are those albums. I'm going to give you 5 albums that I found to be the most disappointing this year. Please tell me in the comments what you think of my albums that I've picked, and also drop your own list as well. What's been the most disappointing album of the year to you? These are my 5. Let's just get on with it. Starting with perhaps an obvious one here. I think a lot of people have labelled this as a disappointing release this year, and I kind of see it. Now, I will start by saying I do actually think this is a pretty good album, and at the end of the day, pretty good shouldn't be really that bad, but it's more of the expectations, and pretty good for what this album could have been is a letdown. And I did do the same thing last year for Regina Spektor on that list, where I enjoyed that album too, but the expectations of what I would think that the artist can produce was just far lower than really what it could have been, and that's basically why this one's here too. I think KAYTRAMINE is one of the best producer DJs around at the moment. He's put out some excellent albums, like Bubba has really grown on me over the years. I think that's an album that I really underrated to begin with, but I absolutely love that one now. And 99.9%, well, I always knew that was great. I mean, that's a fantastic album, a really star-studded list of incredible features just being laced into KAYTRAMINE's style in such an eclectic way. And Amine, for me, was an artist that easily could have slipped into KAYTRAMINE's style as well. This seemed like the perfect match. Like, there was just no way this could go wrong. And it technically didn't go wrong, but it didn't really deliver in the way that I'd hoped. And it also didn't really play to the strengths of both artists. I feel like KAYTRAMINE slipped back a little bit, kind of was a bit more restrained. Some of the production was a bit more chill, a bit vibey. It was kind of catering a little bit more to a vibey hip-hop listen rather than the kind of typical dance stuff that you'd expect from him. And Amine wasn't his usual animated, charismatic self, who was just usually full of bags of fun. And yeah, he's just kind of chilling on this one, and I feel like they could have played more to their strengths. We've heard Amine over dance production before. Listen to that Disclosure track that he's on, by the way, if you haven't. That is a fantastic track, My High. I mean, it proves that he can go over dance production, and he would have been fantastic over some KAYTRAMINE dance beats too. But we never quite got that, and it's just a little bit of a letdown, all right? It's a solid album, but this should have been like the dance version of Silk Sonic. Like, that's how good this should have been. This should have been an album of the year contender. Next, I've got Roisin Murphy's Hit Parade, an album titled Hit Parades, where there's no friggin' hits on it. What's all that about then? You got no hits on an album called Hit Parade, mate? Why? But I did expect a little bit more from this. Of course, I'm a big Roisin Murphy fan. I've even done a worst to best of Roisin Murphy on this channel before too. And just for the record, if I were to remake that list with this album included, this unfortunately would be at the bottom, because I don't find this to be a very interesting, engaging listen at all. It's a shame, because I think the premise of this album, Roisin Murphy doing more house-leaning type stuff with DJ Koze on production, sounded like this could really work. But every time a single got dropped from the album, I was just more and more anxious and worried about what the album was going to sound like, because none of them really stuck out at all. I didn't find her delivery particularly engaging. I found her to be pretty bland across this whole thing, to be honest with you. And usually, Roisin is an eclectic, vibrant singer that brings so much to the table. I mean, listen to Overpowered. That album has a lot of banging, you know, electro pop dance production that she absolutely kills. So why can't she do it when DJ Koze is producing for her? I don't really know. I don't get how this album turned out the way it did. The rhythms, the grooves just aren't locked in at all. They're really stagnant and really still and don't move in a fluid way. That might be DJ Koz's fault more so than Roisin's fault, really, because to be honest, I'm not the biggest DJ Koz fan. I'm a big fan of house music. I've spoken a lot about house music on this channel, and when it's good, it's friggin' good, okay? But DJ Koz, not really one of the more exciting names in the game for me at the moment. He's got a few good tracks, but I don't think as an albums artist he's particularly that great. So maybe the signs were there to begin with. It was never going to be an album I was going to really like. But at the end of the day, both artists are capable of bringing more out of what they did here, really. I think I could technically brand Boygenius more as underwhelming than a disappointment, if there's even that much of a difference between them both. But for me, I think with the fact that this is one of the most acclaimed albums of the year, one of the most beloved albums of the year, and a Grammy-nominated album now, by the way, there is a very good chance that this could win Album of the Year at the Grammys, which is pretty crazy considering where these artists were like 4 years ago. They were nowhere near that recognizable as names, and it's great to see them doing well for themselves. I'm not trying to hate on their success or anything like that before anyone tries saying that. That is not what I'm doing here. I'm just speaking from my own personal perspective. And for me, I just find this one to be pretty underwhelming. I actually thought it was decent at first when I first heard it, but I went back to it about a week ago, and my God, this album's grown off me like crazy. There was really very little to latch onto with this album for me, aside from those really strong rock tracks where I think they're showcasing that there's a real good future for these guys doing a bit more of an angsty rock approach that I think they really nailed on the album. It's just such a shame that the rest of the album is padded out with these slow, mundane, dull, lifeless ballads that just really have very little going for them. Like, oh my gosh, some of these tracks are so dead. Like, I just find these three not very captivating as emotional singers. They're not emotive. They have really stiff and lifeless voices that I can't latch onto at all. I think there's so many other singer-songwriters out there that do slow, folky music in a much more engaging way. I mean, just listen to anything Adrian Lenker's ever put out. I mean, so much better than what these guys do for sure. But yeah, I just am really underwhelmed by this. I think there's potential there with them. I think Not Strong Enough is fantastic. Like, that's how good they can get. So that's why it's a bit of a disappointment for me, because when you hear tracks like that and you hear them really let loose and they really just let go and really emote in a beautiful way, it's so good. Like, this is one of the best songs of the year. Do not be surprised to see it on my songs of the year list, which will be coming soon, because that is how good that song is. But then the rest of the album just doesn't live up to that. It's so disappointing to me. Yeah, for me, I just don't really see it. I think we might have gassed them up a little too early. I think they're still in a bit of a phase where they're working towards being fantastic artists, but I just think we've jumped the gun a bit too soon. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they're at that level just yet. In a few years maybe, but not right now. So if that last one wasn't going to go down too well, this one won't either, really. Ooh. Danny Brown, Quaranta. Look, for me, I'm actually pretty happy to see Danny in a different place now, where he's been more introspective, where he's been more reflective and giving us more thought-provoking tracks that have deeper meanings to them than what he used to do, really. I think with his more animated and wacky approach that he took years ago, that he's totally moved on from now, as you can see. But unfortunately, it just doesn't really engage me. I thought those tracks were actually really underwhelming to listen to. And I found the beats on those tracks just really bland as well. Like, I thought he could have at least provided us with more interesting production to back the more introspective approach he was taking. But they just feel really flat and unengaging to me, which is a shame, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's a huge shame to be putting this on this list, because it's so clear that he's matured massively as an artist, but the maturation, I guess, took away some of the excitement that we got before. And even the tracks that were like more animated and freaky on this album are just really not good. Like, Tantor has a terrible beat. Some of his lines on that track are funny, don't get me wrong, but the beat I think is awful. And then the Jen's terrific whatever track with the chorus, That chorus is atrocious, like one of the worst choruses I've heard this year. I'm not even joking. Like, just shut up. But yeah, for me, I just found it really underwhelming, this album. For an album that is supposed to be inspired, it feels very uninspired. These beats and this production style really runs thin quickly. A lot of the tracks run into one another. I have just found it underwhelming. We waited a long time for this. This album's been hyped up for a while. He turned 40 like 2.5 years ago, so we knew 40 was on the way for at least 3 or 4 years. Now we finally got it. I think it's safe to say this has been quite disappointing for me. And finally, one of the most exciting up-and-coming UK bands, Squid, which for me set the tone really well for that first album. Like, I was really excited for these guys. Narrator is a fantastic track, one of my favorite tracks of the year it came out, and of course the debut album that they put out was really strong too. A lot of the teaser tracks, the EPs that they were putting out in the run-up to that album were really strong as well. Like, these guys set themselves up to be such an exciting band, and for this album I've really found it hard to commit a lot of it to memory. Like, each time I listened to it, I just was finding it going in one ear, out the other, and it just wasn't sticking with me at all. I think one of the things this album suffers from is really having a lot of lengthy tracks that for 3-4 minutes, they're pretty whatever, they're pretty standard. I don't know, they're pretty okay. And then for the last minute or so, they come to life, and then they do the thing where everything builds up and it crescendos, and it's just like the same pattern that they kept doing on all of the tracks, really. And by that point of the song, I was already pretty underwhelmed, and it wasn't enough to save the song for me. Apart from The Blades, which I think is a track that is, you know, more in line with what you'd expect Squid to do, having a bit more of an animated delivery from start to end, peaks and troughs, the instrumental kind of going up and down and taking you in different directions. But I think the rest of the album just had too many moments where I was just pretty underwhelmed, and yeah, it wasn't really doing much for me. So yeah, a bit of a weird one, this one. I thought Squid were just destined for greatness, but yeah, I couldn't really get with this one. But I've seen a lot of people call this one of the best albums of the year, so it's doing something for somebody out there. It just didn't personally do it for me. And that is it from me, the 5 most disappointing albums from 2023. Do not forget that this is personal to me. I'm not telling you that these albums aren't good and you shouldn't like them. I just personally think where I'm standing, this is how I felt about the albums. Of course, if these are some of your favourite albums of the year, which I'm sure some of them will be, that's all good. It's all good. And if you have any opinions on what I've said, please let me know. Please be respectful. Please tell me your most disappointing albums of the year as well. Would love to see a conversation going. And yeah, thank you as always. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out more videos, more exciting videos on the way. The year-end list season is just really kicking off. There's so many more videos that I'm going to drop for you guys. So yeah, it's exciting. Have a good day. Subscribe, check out my Patreon, and goodbye.